Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Beers and Bullshit. This week, we're going to go ahead and take a look back at the NFL season, the 2020 NFL season, all the chaos that it was, with, pretty much no fans in the stands 3/4 of the time, and we're just going to kind of cover everything from beginning to end. But I'm excited here to start out the podcast and introduce to you, man, you're going to be hearing and maybe seeing someday a lot on this podcast here is Mr. Jace Sime. So, Jace, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I hope everybody's ready for the regular season of the podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed the preseason so far because the co-host is here. I am making my inaugural episode debut. Actually, I made that debut. We'll get to that story later, but it's exciting to be here. I'm stoked to finally start this up, and I'm ready to roll, man. Let's do this.
Yeah, let's do this. Jace is going to be our 38-year-old quarterback. He doesn't play the preseason at all whatsoever. He's probably going to sit and negotiate his contract a little bit, go down to Mexico, enjoy some family time, and then decide to join us when the real gritty nitty starts up. So it's good to finally have you back.
You know what? You might know me by my other name, Matt Castle.
Matt Castle.
My NFL comp, if I really had to pin a name out there. So
how about Luke McCown, the guy who literally sits on the couch?
Josh? I don't even get to be Josh.
Hey, Luke's still the one in the league, isn't it? Or is it Josh who's still in the league?
Josh was.
Okay.
Josh had he could be in the coaching staff for the Houston Texans, actually.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Being groomed as a head coach there. But yeah, no, I'm excited, man. I've been looking forward to this. I'm ready to dive into this. And episode 1 for me. Let's go.
Let's go. And you know what? Let's go ahead and just kick it right back to you. You brought the beer tonight. Go ahead and drop it down.
All right. So every week, what I try to do is I go to either Boyd's or Smith's or Mr. Liquor. Those are the 3 best places to get good beer around here. And I try to find something unique and something cool. And I'm walking by, and I almost had to stop and walk back when I saw this. And from New Belgium, they do a annual bourbon barrel series that they call Oak Spire. Well, normally it's just your typical bourbon barrel aged beers, but this year they decided to do a old-fashioned version. So that is fascinating to me because obviously, if you're not a bourbon guy, an old-fashioned it's like a Manhattan. It's one of the oldest cocktails we know, and it's essentially just your bourbon, a little bit of sugar, some Angostura bitters, and then a cherry and orange peel. And it is fantastic if you like bourbon and whiskey. And so to see I've never seen a beer that was old-fashioned style. So I kind of dove into this, and I'm gonna go on a little bit longer on the beer segment because
go away.
I love New Belgium Brewing because they really they were like a catalyst for the craft brewing scene in the Midwest area. I remember back when I was bartending, 12 years ago, and there really wasn't much in the way of craft beers. I mean, you really just had your domestics, your imports, and that was it. But everybody had Fat Tire. That was the big thing. Fat Tire kind of blew up the craft beer scene. And New Belgium actually, when they started, Belgian beers were actually really, really rare. So it's kind of, I have a lot of respect for New Belgium and what they did for the craft brewing scene. And so I was really excited to try this beer. I still haven't actually technically tried it. Cole's half a beer deep already.
I was thirsty. All right, give me a break here.
What do you think of it, Cole? Did you like it?
So I love it. So I'm a fan of old fashions and kind of some of the more traditional, bartending drinks. Like I can enjoy a good Tom Collins every now and then an old fashioned is just something when I'm in the mood for it. It just sits right. And this beer is kind of about the same way. It's very smooth. It's got a strong flavor profile, but it doesn't stick around too much. It kind of it just hits you a little bit at the beginning and then slowly dissolves away in just a nice smooth finish. And you can really tell that it's this, bourbon barrel ale, and that it's been aged properly. So yeah, I think New Belgium absolutely hit it out of the park with this one.
This is fascinating. I love beer. I brew my own beer, so I'm familiar with the process. And the website doesn't give a whole lot to how they brew this beer. They just say, and I quote, "This is the most difficult beer we have ever produced. We had to use custom built proprietary infusion methods that pull flavors from bourbon steeped charred oak and marry it with oranges, cherries, and a dash of bitters. And what's fascinating, because I'm a bourbon guy, so I love drinking old fashions, but when I take a drink of this beer, I actually taste an old fashioned, and it throws me for a loop. I don't feel like I'm drinking a beer, and this is phenomenal. I love it. Probably one of the best beers I've ever had, and I might go back by Boyd's and get another 6-pack on my way home because this is fantastic. If you guys want to check it out, again, it is New Belgium Oak Spire, the old-fashioned bourbon barrel age edition, and it is available, according to their website, it's available at Mr. Liquor, at Smith's, and at Boyd's, but they also say that Independent Ale House has it on tap, so I might have to go check that out as well. So, yeah.
I would be heavily interested in going to checking that out on tap just because you have to almost imagine, obviously coming out of a bottle, it's good. You know, glass is always fantastic as far as if you're going to drink at home, but I just have a special love for the tap. So I will definitely maybe have to join you in that adventure there.
And have some of the best pizza in town as well. So.
Oh, yeah. So shout out once again. That's going to be Independent Ale House. I believe they're going to be on Main Street here in Rapid City. Oh, no, St. Joe.
St. Joe.
St. Joe.
Yeah,
one of the two one-way streets in this town because we're still old-fashioned enough to do that. We're also going to go ahead and throw a couple of shout-outs here. Also downtown, Teddy's Sports Bar and Grill, good friend of the show. Top Wave Studios, Mr. Paul Wolf, thank you so much for everything you do. Also as well, sponsoring the Business Entertainment here in Rapid City. We're actually using their expanded studio just to go ahead and stretch our wings a little bit. So we really appreciate you guys here in Rapid City. Jason, anybody else you want to shout out here?
Nobody at the top of my head. I was not prepared for that, Cole, so I'll send it right back to you.
You're good. I'm the corporate sellout of the group
Okay,
here. So,
gotcha.
yeah, Mr. Authentic with his homebrewing and beers. I'm like, yep, corporate logos, sponsorships all day long. We're actually not making a dime. They're just friends. So.
There is a sponsor, shouldn't say sponsor. They did not sponsor the show, but I do want to give a shout out to Deshaun Watson.
Watson.
On behalf of Denver Bronco fans, I would just like to give a special shout out to Deshaun. Let him know that the Rocky Mountains are beautiful. That area is phenomenal. Weed is legal, and it is one of the best places to live in the country. So, Deshaun, if you're looking at that map, just right in the middle, below the great state of Wyoming, you will find Denver, Colorado.
Just remember, Deshaun, you have to play Patrick Mahomes twice a year and Derek Carr, the quarterback killer, as well. You know, the dark-eyed assassin, as he is. The chief killer, almost 2-0 this year against them, you know. But we can go ahead and recap that there. We're going to go ahead and start and just recap the whole entire 2020 NFL season here. We're going to start off, kind of recap the offseason, the draft, see how that played out throughout the entire year. You know, what rookies kind of lived up to their expectations, who exceeded them, and who absolutely fell flat on their face as far as, you know, free agency wins, losses, and just kind of the way the season unfolded, whether you're happy with it or not. We're going to start out here with the 2020 NFL Draft. Number 1 pick, Joe Burrow. Jace, give me your opinion on Joe. What do you think about him?
Joe Burrow is a stud. He's the complete package, everything that you're looking for in a quarterback. I know he was obviously one of the highest touted draft prospects since Andrew Luck, and I still love the kid. I think, you know, all things considered, he did a fantastic job for his first year in that offense. I'm excited to see how he's going to develop in the future. I think he's going to be a future stud in this league, and I would like to see him bring the Bengals to relevance, and I would like to see him compete with the Ravens and the Browns, and now I should say the Browns. Still feels weird to say, but compete with the Ravens, Browns, and possibly the Steelers for that AFC North title. But, you know, the big problem I think Joe Burrow suffered was a little bit of a crutch and a handicap, and you may have heard of this, but it's called the Cincinnati Bengals.
It's the fact that the Bengals are still the Bengals outside of him and T. Higgins.
I don't know about Zach Taylor yet. I'm still on the fence about him. I was scratching my head when they hired him, and he hasn't sold me yet, but I think this year is going to be the make or break year for Zach Taylor, and we'll see what he does to shake things up and to build this team around Joe Burrow, because that's what he's going to have to do if he wants to be successful as a coach there.
Oh, 100%. I completely agree with you there. I think Joe Burrow, number 1, I mean, we joke about it with the Cincinnati Bengals, but he was just laid out there. I mean, just on a silver platter. Deshaun Watson levels of just paper-thin offensive line. And I think, obviously, you saw it when he eventually tore his ACL. And that obviously ended his season early. But, with the Bengals, I'm actually going to shout them out as kind of one of my winners of the offseason / the draft, just because they picked up Joe Burrow. Obviously, he looks, like you said, the complete package. I was really high on him coming out of college just because watching his campaign with LSU last year, a little bit of a one-hit wonder kind of coming out, and that's really the only knock you had against him. I think he put up the best college season I've ever personally seen, and statistically, it is the best college season most people have ever seen. So, coming out, I don't think there are a lot of questions with him. I think at this point, what do you do to protect him? Do you get him someone like, kind of flashing forward to this year's draft, do you get him like a Penei Sewell out of Oregon or some offensive tackle? Because he's got weapons there. Obviously Joe Mixon, injury history or not, can ball when he's healthy. And then you got T. Higgins. You have other players on that team. So with the Bengals, like you said, it's going to be interesting to see with Zach Taylor if they can kind of make that leap this year.
Yep. And it will be exciting to see. I think this upcoming NFL season is going to be insane. I think there's going to be so much shaking up going on in the offseason that half the teams aren't even going to be recognizable from what they used to be. So I'm excited to see what this next season has to offer.
Oh, it's going to be crazy. And then looking back, obviously last year with the draft was a little bit more unpredictable because we didn't have the combine coming out, but kind of one person who everybody almost touted as like the prospect of this class. And I'm going to move on to the next pick in the 2020 draft here. We're not going to spend too much time going back, but Chase Young is someone who extremely impressed me throughout this entire year. He looks every bit as advertised as the monstrous pass rusher coming out of Ohio State. I'd almost say he has like about a year of what the Bosa's looked like as rookies, and he's just extremely impressive for Washington. Where do you see him going in the future with that team?
I think that he is going to be the face and the staple of that defense. Honestly, I think that the Redskins are going to be the next powerhouse defense in the NFL. I think that they're going to be, the next Legion of Boom. They're going to be that scary defense to go up against. There's always a handful of defenses every year that every time your team plays them, you're like, oh shit, here we go. Hopefully we can score 17 points a day if we're lucky. And I think that the way that they're trying to build that team in Washington is, I think they're obviously going into it with a defense first approach, and Chase Young is absolutely he is a monster. What was he, second overall? Is that what, or what was his
second overall out of Ohio State? Washington took him last year, and I'm going to piggyback right off of that too, just because you saw it when they were hiring their coaches last year with Washington. They're trying to do this cultural reset. Personally, I would love to see Dan Snyder out of there, but that's a conversation for another day. And you see Ron Rivera, who, let's not forget, was the 2005 coordinator for the Bears defense that went to the Super Bowl, ultimately lost against the Colts, but great defensive coach in his own right before he went on to the head coaching realm. And then on top of that, you had Jack Del Rio, who I love a little bit as an old Jack Raiders coach. Obviously, you love him from his time in Denver as a defensive coordinator. And so you see that very much with this team. That defense is just in its identity. And it's kind of crazy when you see a defense like this with someone like Chase Young who plays that 3-4 defensive end but still gets after the quarterback. I mean, it almost looks like older Texans kind of defense with J.J. Watt leading that defense with a lot of young studs around him. And hopefully they can at least live up to that potential, unlike the Texans kind of never did.
Yeah. And, honestly, defense, and I think we see it time and time and time again, but defense really does win championships. There's been a lot of, there's been a lot of obvious instances where great offenses have won the Super Bowl, but more times than not, it's a team with the better defense. And I think that this past Chiefs and Bucks Super Bowl just a few days ago was a prime example of that. I mean, that Buccaneers defense was amazing. And I think that if Washington can continue this recipe, they already have enough studs, with Antonio Gibson and Terry McLaurin. I think they have enough stud. Sorry, I got something stuck in my throat, but I think they have enough studs on offense that they're just a good quarterback away and a couple more pieces of that defense away from being a contender every year.
Well, and to be honest with you, I think they're one of my dark horses to trade up this year in the NFL draft. We'll probably cover that a little bit later, how promising this quarterback class does look coming up. But once again, they are just one quarterback away. Love Alex Smith, and obviously, comeback player of the year award winner. But yeah, if they just get some young stud quarterback that can kind of grow with that offense, it's just going to be incredible because they were also one of my winners, last offseason, just because they got a monster pass rusher and then they go out and they get Antonio Gibson. And, those were their first 2 picks. And actually, fun fact here, they were the only rookies, or they were the only team to have a pair of rookies score over 80 on the PFF scale. So by technicality, if you want to look at just value overall, valuing first and second round picks is the most valuable. And then just by grading by PFF, they won the draft.
Yeah.
So I think
no doubt about it.
That just speaks for their future there. And a fair amount of cap space going on this offseason. The only issue I see that they face going forward is, God damn it, do not go next year into the football team name. Pick something. Commit to it.
I agree. Washington football team is so lame. That was just the laziest thing that they could have done. There was a lot of example names out there, a lot of nominated names, and every one of them was actually a pretty decent name for them. And Washington football team, that was so lame. So I agree. And another thing that gives me a little bit of hope about them is going back to the draft and how they just hit every piece of that draft. And it makes you wonder if Dan Snyder is he kind of letting loose the reins and actually letting Ron Rivera take over the show. Because if Snyder can stay away, God, what was it?
Just be an owner, though. Just be an owner.
Exactly. He's Jerry Jones syndrome is what he's got going on right now. But Jay Gruden said, I think he was quoted a couple weeks ago saying that it's really difficult and it's really frustrating when you spend months of preparation and you do all this work and you're scouting and you've got your guys that you're zeroed in on, and here comes draft day and you've got this big old game plan together with all these people in the war room and you know what you're doing. And then Dan Snyder comes in. This is his words, not mine. Dan Snyder comes in off of his yacht and just completely ruins everything. That's got to be unbelievably frustrating. And, Gruden's probably thankful to be out of there, but yeah.
Yeah, and no, 100%. I think I look back to the movie Draft Day when you look at the owner, Jimmy, whatever his name is, and he's running out of his plane with his supermodel wife who's like 30 years old. He's like 75, 80 years old. And he's going into the draft war room and he's freaking out because Kevin Costner, the GM that he plays, ends up drafting this linebacker who was projected to slip in the draft, and he drafts him first overall. Ends up swinging a deal, getting all these picks that he gave away back, and actually, would be considered a winner in the draft. Also picking up a running back that the team needs, and if you haven't seen it, watch Draft Day. It's fantastic, but that's just what I think of most NFL owners, and rest in peace to Al Davis, but I do appreciate having Mark Davis in as a Raiders fan, just because Mark kind of realizes that he's not the football person his dad was. And obviously that can pass people by. He just lets the team be run by Mike Mayock and John Gruden. So that's what I do appreciate. But speaking of, I'm going to actually jump over and keep talking about the Las Vegas Raiders as my first loser of the offseason. I'm going to go ahead and shit on my own team here just because in the draft they pick up Henry Ruggs, the third, as the first wide receiver off the board ahead of Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb. Obviously, this is kind of a questionable long-term move. I do love Henry Ruggs. I think he has potential, but I guess, Jace, you were with me on draft night. What were you thinking when the Raiders drafted Henry Ruggs?
I about fell off the couch. I was like, what? As a Broncos fan, more than anything, I wanted CeeDee Lamb, actually. But when the Raiders came on the clock, my first thought was, well, here goes CeeDee Lamb. There's no way. And if it's not CeeDee, it's Jerry Jeudy. I was sold on the fact that both Lamb and Jeudy would be off the board by the time Denver got there, and that we'd end up with
you guys had Henry Ruggs.
Sorry,
or potentially one of the other
yeah.
first-round receivers like Jalen Reagor or Justin Jefferson.
I would have been happy with Jefferson in hindsight. I think we all would have been. But
too.
I was just very surprised that Gruden went for the smaller, speedy receiver over the
Al Davis,
the big
pick?
body guy. Yep. So yep.
Yeah, Al Davis' spirit comes back from the dead one more time. And I don't even want to say shoot us in the foot because I do like Henry Ruggs, but I was a huge CeeDee Lamb fan coming into the draft, and I think you will see in the coming years because CeeDee kind of got robbed as a rookie. Not saying Andy Dalton isn't an NFL caliber quarterback, but obviously when you go from playing with Dak Prescott to Andy Dalton and just having the season that the Cowboys did have, it's kind of a bit of a drop-off. He still put up impressive numbers. He was still, one of the better rookie wide receivers, obviously just being kind of outshined by Justin Jefferson. But I think when you see the next handful of years and you see Dak come back and he gets integrated in that offense more, CD, I think, is going to be proven to be the best receiver in that class, but also I would have taken Judy, someone your Broncos did end up picking. So I guess personally, how do you feel about Jerry Jeudy, his Alabama teammate?
I'm so excited about Judy. I think that this year was an outlier because Cortland Sutton was injured all year. So I am excited to see what this offense can do with Sutton, Judy, Fant, and Hamler all healthy and full go. And I think that Denver's offense is so young and so talented that with above average quarterback, they're going to be a top 10 offense easily. But that's obviously biased as a Broncos fan. We'll see what happens. But yeah, no, I was really shocked when the Raiders did take Ruggs, but I'm not going to discount him yet. Like you said, he showed a lot of flashes of ability. Like he could be a Tyreek Hill type player, and obviously Tyreek is one of the most dominant receivers in the league right now. So who knows what Ruggs is going to do? I'm still excited to see how he grows, and we'll see what happens, especially in the offseason. If Derek Carr's still the quarterback for the Raiders or not, we'll see what happens. But
yeah, we'll go ahead, and I did add him to the quarterback carousel list we're going to be covering later when we do kind of cover the upcoming offseason. Just wanted to touch back again where I had the Raiders kind of losing the offseason. With Henry Ruggs, not a bad pick. I think we whiffed on Damon Arnett. I kind of liked him coming out of college, but I definitely viewed him in my pre-draft coverage as like a second or third round guy. Did not see him getting drafted in the first round. And you kind of saw that. He was hurt all year long, and when he was on the field, he just looked like warmed up dog shit. And so, I hope he can kind of make the moves. Obviously, cornerback is the hardest transition to make in the NFL, especially from a rookie standpoint. So I don't want to be too biased against it, but just what I saw, the returns weren't there. And the rest of the rookie class, I mean, you're looking at Lynn Bowden Jr. We traded away to the Dolphins for like a 6th or a 7th round pick. So automatically we cut our losses by 3 rounds right there. So that was a huge L. Brian Edwards showed a little bit of potential, but no one else really kind of jumped out from this class. And then you talk about the free agency whiffs of Corey Littleton, who looked horrible at linebacker. Nick Kwiatkowski looked decent. Obviously, we had a kind of a little bit of a low-key pickup in Nelson Aguilar that ended up doing really well for us. Still, though, I think too many bads to really outweigh the couple of goods we got, and we only really raised 1 win over last year. So we had the cap space, we had the draft position, and we could have done a lot better with it. So me just kind of just judging last year's offseason, looking through the glasses of obviously the end of this year, I'm going to call us one of the losers of last year's offseason.
And another loser of the draft, I won't even just say the offseason, but the draft, and I think that you and I are both on the same page as this. Well, I mean, we'll see what happens in the future, but the Green Bay Packers, what are you guys doing? I mean,
Pissing off Aaron Rodgers is what you're doing.
I don't mind Jordan Love as a quarterback, but you have a Hall of Fame level quarterback that, based on what we're seeing out of Breeze and Brady, I mean, Rodgers could still have another, half decade, if not more, left in the tank. If you guys need to put weapons around him, he needs a better receiver to complement Devontae Adams. At the beginning of the season, I would have said you need a tight end, but I think they got that situation resolved. But he needs some more receiving weapons, and I think that's really where they should have went in the draft. I was expecting the Packers to trade up and snag a wide receiver at some point in the draft, but the Jordan Love pick was the single most shocking pick, I think, in the entire first round of the draft. I don't think anybody saw that coming, and based on how well Aaron Rodgers played, like I said, we'll see what Love becomes in the future, but I would call the Packers losers in the draft as far as the first round goes.
Oh, hands down. I think I still had the Packers as one of my losers in the draft. They were actually number 2 behind the Raiders, just because the only thing that Jordan Love getting drafted in the first round did was piss off your quarterback enough to go win an MVP and get to the doorsteps of a Super Bowl.
It's a legitimate strategy.
Yeah, Just go ahead and stoke that fire. I mean, I understand. I get it. He's 35, but he's Aaron frickin' Rodgers. At what point do you not recognize the talent that you have? And, I still loved their second round pick. I like A.J. Dillon. You have Jamal Williams hitting free agency. You have Aaron Jones potentially hitting free agency and leaving. I hope he doesn't with the Packers, but A.J. Dillon was someone who I kind of had at the sleeper running back position as far as one of my second or third round backs that I really loved. And so kind of getting him in Green Bay. But still, what the heck are you doing with Jordan Love? You had Justin Jefferson a little bit ahead of you. You had T. Higgins still on the board. Seriously, you had Joe Burrow's number one target still on the board. And you drafted a quarterback, and not even the best quarterback available at that time, as Philadelphia proved drafting Jalen Hurts.
T. Higgins across from Devontae Adams. That would
scary.
Yeah, especially when you got Aaron Jones in the backfield. That would have been quite the combo they would have had going on.
Matt Patricia would have been having like wet dreams, and not the good kind either. The kind that he runs to his parents' bedroom at the end of it, just having to face that twice this year before he got fired, or maybe he got fired before the second Packers game. Who knows? But still, I just hope with the wide receiver draft class that I'm going to cover a little bit later, there's a lot of great talent coming out. Please God, Green Bay, do yourself a favor and get yourself a wide receiver this year.
Agreed.
So just to kind of cover a couple more things on the draft here, we obviously covered the Bengals, Washington. I think Tampa Bay was obviously a big winner in the draft in the offseason as well. Tristan Wirfs, as we saw him base jump out of a 5-foot pool at 6'8", 350. Yeah. And then Antoine Winfield Jr., I mean, your first two picks there guide you to a Super Bowl, so that's a win right there.
Absolute just stud picks that they got there. And, Wirfs did phenomenal his rookie year. Just the protection that he was able to provide Brady, I think, contributed a lot to the success on the offense. And then, Winfield Jr., that he's going to be a force to be reckoned with in the future. Man, he's a stud. That's all I can say. He's a stud.
Yeah. And then before we kind of go on to cover the season a little bit more, my last loser that I'm going to bring up here, not so much because they made a bad move, but because where they are with the hindsight 2020 glasses on is going to be the New Orleans Saints. So last year, I like Adam Troutman as their tight end. Good pick. He could be a good quality tight end for the future of whoever plays quarterback there, because I think Drew Brees is retiring. But you draft Cesar Ruiz in the first round, and I think that he proved that he was a reach right off the bat. He was one of the more poorly graded guards who started all 16 games this year by PFF, I believe, only having about a 60 rating. Poor in pass protection, decent in run blocking, so hopefully he can kind of help in the future. But you really saw with the Saints only having 4 picks in the upcoming offseason where they could have up to a negative $100 million in cap space, this whole push it to next year philosophy that the Saints have had over the last 4 or 5 years, just trying to stay in title contention in the last years of Drew Brees, I think is going to bite them in the ass. And I'll cover it in a bit, but I do have them as one of my teams from the playoffs this year that doesn't make it back because of their decisions in the past couple off seasons, including last year.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Absolutely.
Yeah. That was last year's off season. Obviously, a lot of people were looking different. When we kind of start the season off, I feel like some of the way it ended and some of the way, it kind of progressed and through, mixes up where we start, because we start off with Dallas really being a Super Bowl favorite in the NFC. Obviously, the Packers were up there too. The Saints kind of get a little bit of popularity. The Buccaneers were an intriguing team, but I don't know if anybody was really having them as a front-running contender, maybe a bit of a dark horse at the beginning of the year.
Yeah. Even going into the playoffs, I don't think anybody really expected, not even NFC Championship out of them, but yeah.
And that's the crazy part. And then you go to the AFC, obviously, we were hopeful as Bronco and Raider fans, only to get disappointed yet again, because that just always happens in our life. But you had the Chiefs kind of owning the AFC. The Ravens were kind of viewed as a half step behind, with the Titans being intriguing. And then, I don't know, we kind of talked about the Bills a little bit, but no one really saw the Bills kind of jumping out the way that they did.
I think, I agree. I think that Josh Allen's progression as a quarterback took such a huge step forward this year. And what he was able to accomplish, and Josh Allen, I've liked him since Wyoming. I wanted Denver to go after him, but I knew that wasn't going to happen. But just how far he has come, because his rookie year was not good. And he has learned and he has progressed and he's turned into a phenomenal quarterback. He was PFF's 7th ranked quarterback behind Russell Wilson, Ryan Tannehill, Mahomes, Watson, Brady, Rodgers. So, I mean, he's in that elite category. And I think that with the Bills, I think one of the biggest offseason moves they did that I was actually expecting it to do the opposite was Stephon Diggs. When Diggs left Minnesota, I was like, I was not expecting him to make much of an impact. I thought he was going to be John Brown 2.0 over there, and I wasn't expecting it to be I wasn't expecting him to do and accomplish what he did over there. But I think that McDermott is building a really good team. I think he's already built a really good team. And yeah, the Bills, I think, are going to be the kings of the East for a while.
Oh, hands down. The Bills were definitely an intriguing team coming into this offseason. I will say I was a little bit more on board with the Stephon Diggs trade just because of watching him a little bit more closely with having a lot of friends who are Minnesota Vikings fans. I kind of have taken them on as almost a second team. So in his first season with the Vikings, when he was kind of breaking out and Adam Thielen wasn't quite breaking out yet, and Diggs was really this like primary only target that they had there. I think for Sam Bradford at the time was their quarterback.
Yep.
But Diggs, he was phenomenal as the number one option. And I think where the issue with Minnesota was is obviously, all due respect, Adam Thielen is also a number one receiver. And so when you have two number ones and then you have someone like Diggs who is a true number one receiver personality, and by that I mean you always see the greats, they have egos to them. There's just no way about it. The TOs, the Jerry Rices even, like Jerry, great teammate that he was, but the guy talked a lot of shit. And as a number one receiver, you almost have to have that ego. And Diggs has it almost to the competitor's aspect. People thought he was just being selfish, and he's just like, no, I just want a ball. And I think you saw that this year. You saw that at the end of the AFC Championship game when he was the last person on the field, just staring at the Kansas City Chiefs, just getting that hate in his eyes. I see Stephon Diggs as just the ultimate competitor and just someone who just wasn't satisfied being 1A/B.
Yeah, he's got the competitive nature of like Randy Moss, but without quite the mouth.
or the wanting to hit like police officers and shit like that, and get into legal trouble, moon the crowd. Stephon Diggs just goes and balls. But I will say on the flip side though, it was poetic, and I love it because I love win-win trades. I love when a team can trade away a disgruntled star. That star can flourish in another area, but then that team doesn't really get hurt in the other end. And Minnesota literally turns around and uses the first-round pick on Justin Jefferson. And so I think that's another thing that's kind of interesting, because I think that's another team we'll get to on the quarterback carousel of the Vikings who really could be interesting going forward. What do you think about Minnesota with Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen, obviously Justin Jefferson, a pretty talented offense, but questions at the quarterback position with Cousins, debatably, because Cousins has played elite at times and, well, not elite at other.
It's interesting. And one of the things that it's kind of mind-boggling to me, because on paper, Minnesota has probably one of the best rosters in the league. They've got
hands down.
They've got a phenomenal roster, and I do have faith in Mike Zimmer. I believe in Mike Zimmer. That belief has been waning over the past couple of years, I must admit, but I think that they need the right offensive coordinator. Yeah, I think that's really
when they lost Pat Shurmur, that was a huge hit, and then Stefanski this last year too.
Yep, and is it Minnesota that's bringing? Is it Clint Kubiak? Is that?
I believe they're bringing in Gary's kid because
Clint
Gary
Kubiak,
just retired.
Yep. So he's going to be the new offensive coordinator. Obviously, as a Broncos fan, I love the Kubiak family, but I'd be really interesting to see what Kubiak does bring to this offense, because I think Minnesota's biggest problem is they have the talent. They have a good head coach. They need to get their defense back to what it was, because they used to be one of the most dominant defenses, and now they're getting a little soft on that end. But they can't follow through. They get so close. They're like the Saints. Okay, my biggest comp to them is, even though the Saints and the Vikings seem to knock each other out of the playoffs every year, they're probably my biggest NFC comps, because they both have great rosters. They both have good coaching. They both have above average defenses, but neither of them can just get that final stretch in to make it to the Super Bowl. Yeah, they fall apart when everything's on the line. And so I think that, I don't know if it's a culture thing or if it's a coach, and maybe it is a coaching thing, but quelling those nerves in the big games and following through with your game plan, doing your adjustment. Are they not adjusting right under pressure? Who knows what's going on, but it's kind of all speculative. I can't really pinpoint what it is about the Vikings. They have the potential, but they just can't get it done.
And just to kind of bounce back again to the kind of team we're going to parallel a little bit, the Bills and the Vikings. With the Bills, obviously this year, the Chiefs were just, a little bit too much for them. I think they were a year too early. I think 2021 could be the year of the Bills, and I'm a huge believer in that. But what do you see going into this next year? Do you think Josh Allen is the quarterback that can lead them over the hump? Because I think that's been one of Minnesota's follies. Not so much that I'd put Kirk Cousins even in probably the top 3 problems list, but I'd also say, obviously, if you had an elite quarterback there, that's the key to unlocking it. Is Josh Allen the key for Buffalo taking that next step?
I think he's the key for their offense. As far as a whole team taking that next step, I think that they're going to have to focus a little bit more on their defense as well. Buffalo does have a good defense, but they're not quite championship caliber defense. I'm looking at Josh Allen. This is mind-boggling. Okay, 2018, Josh Allen, 2,074 yards and 10 touchdowns. 2019, 3,300 yards and 20 touchdowns. And then last year, 5,300 yards and 42 touchdowns. Now, absolutely elite level numbers, but there's also a plateau. A quarterback can only get so good. Okay. 5,000 yards and 42 touchdowns is that's pretty damn close to the peak of what you can accomplish as a quarterback in the NFL. And so I'm looking at this and thinking, well, can Josh Allen take any more steps forward? He can probably get a little bit better, but there's only so much you can climb that mountain. I think Josh Allen this past year hit his peak, and I think he's going to continue riding his peak for several years. So while he's going through his peak ability, they're going to have to figure out what they need to do to get over that final hump. They got to the AFC Championship game, but how do you compete with somebody like the Chiefs? Okay, and that's the big thing. What is the difference between the Chiefs and the Bills? I think the Chiefs have a little bit better defense than the Bills. I think they're pretty close. I think the biggest difference between the Chiefs and the Bills is you have the greatest tight end to ever play football, and Travis Kelce, in my personal opinion. Yeah, I maybe tight end, but because Knox, he's a tight end for Buffalo right now, right?
So yeah, I'm actually looking up the numbers right now. So they kind of went a little bit back and forth. So I'm going to go ahead and throw a shout out to tight end 3 on the team. Lee Smith, not respected because he's a blocker, but former Raider, love him to death. Actually, the highest rated PFF tight end on the team. But yeah, you have Dawson Knox, who was the 45th ranked tight end with a 61.3 grade, and then a Tyler Kroft, who actually finished a little bit ahead of him, 37th with a 64.3 grade. Even though Knox did have about twice the amount of snaps, but I think we saw Kroft a little bit more as the season kind of went on. That is one thing I would love to see the Bills kind of upgrade on this offseason. I think they have a fantastic defense. I think that, Devin Singletary and Zach Moss are going to be a fantastic 1-2 punch at running back. You have John Brown, Cole Beasley, Stephon Diggs at the wide receiver position. You can definitely add someone in the offseason. But, in the 2021 draft, I actually really love this guy out of Penn State, Pat Freiermuth. He's a traditional blocking and catching tight end. They actually call him Baby Gronk out of Penn State. And so he's someone that's probably going to be available in the second or third round. I don't want to jump too much into the 2021 draft, but he is definitely someone I've seen on a lot of mock drafts going to the Bills in maybe the late first reach round or kind of the second round, because a lot of people, not just you and I, think that
the Bills like their late first reach rounds.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Their reach rounds. The Bills love just getting fucked is really what they just love getting. Yeah, it never has a fan base just love putting themselves through more pain than the Buffalo fan base. Not only do you lose 4 Super Bowls in a row, you lose the AFC Championship game this year. You wait at the airport at 3 o'clock in the morning to watch the Bills go home, but they have this fucking fascination with just going through tables. And unlike, only the Dudley boys, I think, have more of a love for tables than the Bills fans do. And it's just absolutely crazy. I halfway love it. I love getting drunk on Sundays and looking on Facebook, and there's just a Bills fan who's lighting a table on fire. And I'm like, this is not going to end well. Sure enough, I'm sure the Buffalo emergency room is packed full on Sunday afternoons, but gotta love them Bills. Hopefully they kind of make that jump next year. But yeah, really, who else in the AFC East contends with them right now?
Exactly. We'll see what happens with the Dolphins. I think that the Dolphins are going to be slept on quite a bit.
What do you think about the Dolphins season, though? Since we're recapping the season, they go 10-6 with Brian Flores, who I'm going to mention a little bit later because he was my coach of the year. Because of ability, because I don't think this was a 10-6 roster. I think it can grow into a playoff team, but I don't think anybody predicted this roster, nor do I look at it on game film and game tape, and I see a 10-6 team that almost made the playoffs. But here we are. They were just that. They were the third team in the past 30 years to finish with 10 wins and not make the playoffs. So where do you see the Dolphins going forward?
So that going back to that, I absolutely agree with you. I think when I was looking at Coach of the Year, I was looking at Kevin Stefanski and Brian Flores. But if I'm going to look at both of them, I'm going to look at what they have in front of them. Okay, Kevin Stefanski, you have Baker Mayfield, Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt. You got, and then you got studs on defense too. But what did Flores have to work with? He had the great backup himself and Ryan Fitzpatrick. Ryan Fitzpatrick's my favorite quarterback, not because he's the best quarterback, but that dude is, I could go on and on. I mean,
he's a superhero who happens to play backup quarterback.
He is just awesome, man. I love Ryan Fitzpatrick. And I think that Brian Flores deserved that Coach of the Year award. But like you asked what I thought of their season. I thought their season was quite remarkable considering what everybody was expecting them to do. I think, and I firmly believe this, had they not pulled Fitz and switched to Tua, I think that they would have won 2 more games this year.
I think so too. I think that one's a hard one because obviously anytime you have a rookie quarterback, and especially because we don't know a lot of what's going on at practice at the time, so maybe Tua was just balling out in practice. You never know what's going on there. But it was just kind of weird because Fitz wasn't even playing bad. I wouldn't say he was playing elite or carrying the team, but he was definitely playing the type of football they needed out of their quarterback at the time. And then later in the year, even after you saw him get benched, let's just go ahead and break my heart right now and bring up the Raiders game. I mean, dear God, that comeback. How do you not stick with Fitzpatrick even after that? I think that's what killed them.
Yeah. Ryan Fitzpatrick, there's just something magical about him. I love the dude. I hope he sticks around the NFL for many years. I don't know what his contract is with Miami. I don't know if he's there next year or if he ends up with another team. But, I mean, he even did it with the Bucs too. Their teammates love Ryan Fitzpatrick. He has the magic. He has the energy. He's not out there to break the stat, even though he probably could.
I mean, he's not out there 400-yard games.
Yeah, he's not out there with the intentions of like being a Hall of Fame quarterback. He's out there because he loves football and he just has fun. I mean, you're talking about a dude, he's just, rocking his shades with his beard and he's just always chewing gum. He's the Pete Carroll of quarterbacks. He's always chewing a piece of gum.
If Pete Carroll happened to just have like a crossover with a 70s porn star, that is Ryan Fitzpatrick. God. No, seriously, Ryan Fitzpatrick was asked, how many buttons do you normally unbutton on the shirt? And with pure swag, he says, it just depends on the situation, baby. And I'm just like, God damn.
Oh my God.
Ooh, that is swag personified right there. I love Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean, we're both huge Ryan Fitzpatrick stans. Love the guy, and I think that was a huge issue with Miami going forward. So hot take kind of going into this offseason, is Tua their quarterback going into 2021?
Yes, he is.
Okay. You don't think they make some sort of surprise move for a certain
Absolutely not.
Sean Bobson?
They benched Fitz when Fitz was on a roll to start Tua. They drafted Tua, 4th or 5th overall last year. They believe in this kid, and I believe in Tua. I think he has the ability to be a great NFL quarterback. I just think that he needs another weapon and a little bit more protection. I'm looking at...
Yeah, because they pick number 3 this year in the draft. They have the Houston Texans first-round picks, so a huge thing that they're looking at is wide receiver. Have you seen any wide receivers that you like?
I've been looking at the draft board. I'd have to get it back up here. I haven't had a chance to do too much digging into the wide receivers. I typically don't start my college scouting, I guess you would say, until probably late February, early March. But just looking at the big board here, I think Jamar Chase is obviously on number 1 everybody's radars, but then you also got the Alabama duel. You got Jalen Waddle, and then you got Devonta Smith. So who knows? I don't know if they do go wide receiver with that 3rd pick. I think maybe they use they got the 22nd or 23rd pick in the draft, something like that.
Later round one,
PFF has them taking Sewell from Oregon tackle.
That's my only question is, does number 2, because with the Jets at number 2, staying in the AFC East here, what do you do with Sam Darnold this offseason? If you're the GM, you got Robert Saleh in there, who I love for head coach.
Oh, yeah.
From the 49ers.
Favorite
when Richard Sherman jumps on a podcast and all he does is just gush about you, like Richard Sherman, whatever your opinion on him is, I love him and I think he calls out great coaches. And, Saleh is going to be one of those great coaches that players are just gravitating towards. And after Adam Gase, you got to clear the stink out of that locker room.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. He was one of my favorite head coach candidates. And I don't have any hatred for the Jets. I didn't care for the Jets back in the Rex Ryan, Mark Sanchez
sexy
days.
Rex days.
I really didn't care for him back then, but I really don't have a problem. I feel bad for Jets fan. Like, it has got to truly suck to be a New York Jets fan, and I would like to see them be successful one day. Now, I don't know what they do with Sam Darnold. I'm on the fence myself. I think that Sam Darnold is still he's still the package and what you need for a good starting quarterback in the NFL. I think he can do it. I think that Darnold has been a victim of two things over the past 2 years, okay? Mono and Adam Gase.
Ghosts.
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 Yes, he's seeing ghosts on the field. We can't forget about that. No, I think
but Adam Gase for sure.
Yeah, Adam Gase is he is a tumor on teams. I know that's really harsh to say, but he just implodes everything he touches. He wasn't even a good offensive coordinator. All he did was hold Peyton Manning's clipboard for him. Like, that was his job in Denver. Adam Gase did not deserve a head coaching opportunity to begin with. He ruined the Dolphins. He ruined the Jets. He should be relegated to another offensive coordinator position somewhere else and hold another Hall of Fame quarterback's clipboard. I don't know. Does Green Bay have an offensive coordinator position opening?
No, I think what he needs to do is he needs to go ahead and go on down to North Carolina where Phillip Rivers is going to be coaching, and he could hold that Hall of Fame quarterback's clipboard as the offensive coordinator for a high school football team. Because Adam Gase, I'm going to go ahead and just go off here. Seriously, all right, yeah, as much as you hate him as a Broncos fan, dear God, how do you sit there and you hold Peyton Manning's clipboard, you let this ultimate legend run an offense for you, which is just loaded with weapons, by the way. I mean, we're talking historical offense. And then you go to Miami, who at the time, pretty much an up-and-coming team. You got Ryan Fitzpatrick, who literally in Tennessee has just proved how much of a dipshit you are. I mean, you go ahead and you ruin Ryan Tannehill. You just go ahead and shit that down the leg right there. You go ahead and relegate the Dolphins to the point that they start tanking so bad after you are gone. They hire Brian Flores, and I think they might have done that as a mistake too, because then they traded away all their players. They tried to tank like the Jacksonville Jaguars did, but Flores is too good of a coach to let that happen. So after you leave Miami and you go ahead and start that dumpster fire and burn that shit to the ground, then you go ahead and you go to the New York Jets, a team that in a fan base that has already suffered enough because they live in New York where the people are dicks all the time, and they haven't won a Super Bowl since Joe Namath. They're still holding on to Super Bowl III, for God's sakes. And then you take this fan base, who I used to hate, but I just pity at this point, and then you just shit all over them the entire time. You are non-committal to Sam Darnold. You run Le'Veon Bell out of town, even though Le'Veon Bell is a fraction of what he was as a player, and you overpaid him completely. You run Jamal Adams out of town, which, debatable. He's a horrible, coverage safety in Seattle, but he sacked a lot of people. So what it is, people just don't want to play for you. So just go coach high school football where they have no choice to, because they have to go to school every day.
Oh, man, that is...
Rant over.
That was the perfect rant, Cole. Everything you said, I completely agree with you. I cannot stand Adam Gase. The fantasy footballers call him the butthole, and for good reason. Adam the Butthole Gase. Yeah, I don't know where we stand on Sam Darnold quite yet. I still think I just want to see what Darnold can do outside of the shadow of Adam Gase. And so with Robert Saleh there, I think that is the prime opportunity. I firmly believe Saleh's going to turn around this team. I really do. I think that the power pendulum in the AFC East is about to shift. I can see the Bills running it for the foreseeable future with the Dolphins and Jets chomping at the bit for that wild card. And I think I can see Belichick retiring in the next year or two. I don't think he's going to be sticking around too much longer, especially after Tom Brady proved to him that he was not a system quarterback.
Exactly, yeah. Tom Brady, I think, just proved. Belichick, fantastic defensive coach, but when you look at it over the years, he's had some great offensive minds in there, and then I think a lot of people kind of shit on Tom Brady for the fact that, Belichick wasn't one making the offensive scheme. And we could kind of go on about that. The Patriots, whatever, just kind of happy they can lose for a couple of years. Hope they can rebuild and come back. They're now one of the great franchises in the NFL, I think, up there with your Steelers, Cowboys, Raiders, Broncos, I'd put as another one there with obviously multiple Super Bowl titles. Popular teams that fans from everywhere are just going to gravitate towards. And I feel like we focused a lot on the AFC East. Let's touch on the AFC North a little bit here because that's going to get competitive in the next couple of years. You got the Bengals on the rise. The Browns obviously making it farther than any other team in the playoffs from that division. The Ravens, also getting knocked out in the divisional round. And then you have the Steelers as well, who started out as the best team in the AFC, but I feel like were exposed as the mid-range playoff team that they were. Who do you think dominates this division in the next 5 years, just looking at where they are now going forward?
You want my honest opinion?
Honest opinion.
Cleveland Browns.
I think so too, because they're loaded. Baker's young and only improving with Kevin Stefanski, which was a phenomenal hire. I think OBJ leaves because they made it to the playoffs without him. They played their best football without OBJ. At the point you have a number one receiver and you can get that value out of him, I think they go ahead and trade him for a second or third round pick. Someone takes that contract. They go out and they draft another receiver this offseason.
Absolutely. And I think that they're better off without him too. I think Baker was too pressured to throw to OBJ. And I think that once Beckham was on the sideline, unfortunately, I don't want anybody to get injured, but in this case, it actually helped Baker. He wasn't feeling the pressure to feed the superstar wide receiver. He was more comfortable, and he was throwing the ball where it needed to go. Okay, and so I think that, and I'll just put this out. As well as anybody that I'm a huge Baker Mayfield fan. From the minute he was drafted, I've been so excited about Baker Mayfield and his potential. I was disappointed in 2019 when he regressed, but Stefanski, he found the spark in him, and he brought out the quarterback that Baker can be, and I'm excited to see if he progresses more this year. And I think that over the next 8 years, I'm going to say 8 years, I think it's going to be a three-way dogfight between the Bengals, the Browns, and the Ravens. The Steelers, especially after they went out and got Dwayne Haskins, whoever's scouting for their quarterbacks, Dwayne Haskins I did not like him going into the draft. I don't think he's going to amount to anything in the NFL. But there's too much. The difference between the Bengals, the Browns, and the Ravens, and then the Steelers is the Steelers are an old team on the verge of having to go through a rebuild. They are. The Bengals, Browns, and Ravens are all younger teams. The Bengals and Browns more than the Ravens. But I think that especially over the next couple of years with Joe Burrow and that offense and what they end up turning into, I think that it's going to be a three-way dogfight between these three teams over the next decade. And we'll see what happens.
No, of course. And the one thing with the Steelers this offseason is what I would love to see them do. Personally, if I was going to go ahead and fill out a mock draft, and we're going to do a draft episode, so I don't want to dig too much into there, but what I would love for them to do is go out and get someone like Mac Jones.
Yeah.
I think Ben Roethlisberger does come back for another year. Obviously, they start him against probably better judgment. But Mac Jones, man, if you get that guy in there, he is seriously Pittsburgh born and bred. That guy, he's tough as nails. He's a good system quarterback. If you just give him the clipboard, let him learn 1 year behind Ben Roethlisberger for whatever may come next year, I think you're going to be a good team for the future for that. But you have to figure out something this offseason because the Ravens, Browns, and Bengals all have quarterbacks. 26 is Baker and younger. I think Baker's my age, if not a little bit younger.
Yeah.
And then you got the Bengals, obviously
24.
Joe Burrow at 24. You got Lamar Jackson at 23. You have to do something for the future of that division. So that one's going to be interesting. But when we're talking about kind of reclamation projects, I'm going to jump right over to the AFC South. With the Indianapolis Colts, one of my favorite offseason moves that I think is going to happen here, probably within the coming days, wouldn't be surprised if it dropped between us recording this and when the podcast comes out on Sunday, is the Indianapolis Colts, I think, are going to trade for Carson Wentz, and Frank Reich is going to take his career back.
Do you think so?
I really honestly think so.
Interesting.
Because the Colts, have cap space. So that's the big thing is the Colts have cap space to go ahead and take on that contract because they actually have the most cap space this offseason. I believe about $72 million if the off the top of my head number is right. So going into a year when we're regressing with the salary cap, which we haven't ever seen, obviously with COVID and the revenue not being there this year, the Colts are in the most advantageous position going into this offseason, and there's not really a prime quarterback on the market. So I think, you sell a little bit of the farm. They proved last year that they're willing to trade away first-round picks and getting DeForest Buckner. So trade 2 first-round picks away, get Carson Wentz, and put him back with the offensive coordinator who won him a Super Bowl.
I'm going to throw a wrench in this.
Do it.
I still believe Wentz is going to go to the Bears. I think that trade's going to happen. I have a feeling, this is more of a hunch than anything, that the Colts are going to trade for Derek Carr. I could see that happening because I think Derek is a above average quarterback, and I think that with that team,
he would kill it.
In Indianapolis, I think he is the missing ingredient they need without overpaying. Because Derek Carr might demand maybe a first-round pick, but he's not going to demand 2 first-round picks like Carson Wentz will. And so I could see the Raiders trading Carr to Indianapolis, and then I could see the Raiders making a big push for one of these superstar names like Deshaun Watson. I could see, I know there's a lot of talk about Russell Wilson. I don't think he leaves Seattle, but I could see, Gruden making a push for him if Seattle truly is willing to put Russ on the market. But I'm going to throw a fantasy out here, but can you imagine? And this is not going to happen. But can you imagine if the Raiders got Russell Wilson and the Broncos got Deshaun Watson, and then you had a division that was Mahomes, Watson, Wilson, and Herbert?
I know Herbert, which is my favorite quarterback out of this class. We haven't even talked about because the dude is just full of potential. We'll cover him with the AFC West, which we're going to jump to after the East here. But God, that would be crazy. And I think that's the only way I would personally accept that. Fuck you. No, I don't think that the Raiders definitely do not go backwards on quarterback at this point. They have to upgrade. And that's the only way I see Derek Carr leaving Las Vegas is if Deshaun Watson or actually Russell Wilson is someone I never thought of until you said it. I don't think Russell's going anywhere. I think he's more just taking jabs at Seahawks management because they refuse to throw first or second round picks on quality linemen. They refuse to draft good linemen. They don't have good luck with offensive linemen, and Russell's been hit more than any other quarterback. Yeah. So I think he's just trying to ruffle some feathers there. Maybe Sierra just doesn't like it in the cold Northwest. Maybe Las Vegas is more her speed. Now that she's kind of a B-rate star, she can have a show on the Strip. Yep. We would love to have you in town, Sierra and Russell. Right. But Derek Carr is my quarterback. I think the quarterback that leaves from Vegas is Marcus Mariota. I don't see him in a Colts situation, but I think the Colts get a premier quarterback this offseason.
Yeah.
Whether it's Wentz or who knows? Maybe a Deshaun Watson. I don't think you trade him within the division. So I think that's more of a stretch. But the Colts, I think, have to look at owning this division for the next probably 5-10 years because if you actually look at the South, I mean, the Texans are a dumpster fire. The Jaguars are not so – I wouldn't call them a dumpster fire because you're about to get Trevor Lawrence, and I do like Urban Meyer. And the Titans are just a little bit behind the Colts because they have Tannehill, A.J. Brown – Derrick Henry, obviously the NFL rushing leader. So that division could be competitive, but it kind of just looks like a two-headed monster for a while.
Yep. And Frank Wright, I like Vrabel, but Frank Wright is a better coach than Vrabel is.
Hands down.
The Texans, what a dumpster fire.
Yeah, let's talk some shit real fast.
I do not see Deshaun Watson being there next year. No matter how much they try to pressure him, he's either going to get traded or he's going to sit out. He has enough money. I think he'll sit out the season and take the financial loss. But I think the Texans are going to be the number 1 overall pick in the draft next year. I think that they're in the process of imploding. I think the NFL needs to step in and help the ownership out because they're guiding the ship right into an iceberg, and there is obvious organizational chaos going on in there, and somebody's got to figure that shit out because this is probably the most unstable organizational situation I've seen in the NFL in many years. And I don't mind the Texans. I know the fans are very passionate down there in Houston, and for their sake, I hope they figure out a way to figure out what's going on down there. But the Houston Texans, I think they are going to be an absolute dumpster fire next year.
I think Houston, for me, it was just I noticed it was more of an organizational point because you can blame Bill O'Brien and you can fire him and you can get that dumbass out of the building because, dear God, loser of last offseason, if we're going to bring in an actual number one, it's the Houston Texans because you trade away DeAndre Hopkins for a bag of magic beans that don't produce the beanstalk in David Johnson. And then what you get a second round pick back, woohoo, for one of the greatest receivers in the NFL. And then on top of that, your first round pick lands you at number 3 this year. You piss off J.J. Watt to the point he wants to leave. That man saved Houston Houston like brought them back from a hurricane with his efforts, and he wants to leave Houston. That's how bad you fucked up. And then on top of that, there was also in the middle of the year, they actually fired their PR person, who was the only female lead of PR in the NFL and was widely regarded as probably one of the finest executives in any sort of organization in sports. And so I think when you're looking from Bob McNair on down, you're looking at a huge amount of dysfunction that a new GM, a new coach is not going to fix. Like they're just going to burn to the ground, and hopefully a phoenix can rise from the ashes, but it's not going to be with J.J. Watt or Deshaun Watson in town, I think, at all. J.J. leaves first in actually my prediction. I think they hold out on Deshaun a little bit longer. I think J.J. they're going to play coy with. They're going to play nice with. J.J. is going to get his pick of teams, and then they'll pick the deal that J.J. wants. But Deshaun, they're going to bleed it out and try to get everything, and I think they'll end up fucking this trade up just like they did the DeAndre Hopkins. Yeah. Because they could probably get 4 first-round picks if we're being honest, and I think they'll probably get back some sort of soft package, like a couple of late, what ends up being a couple of late firsts, a couple of 2s, and I don't know, a bag of coal on Christmas.
Yep. Hey, 2 third-round picks and a beefy 5-layer burrito.
Yeah, a 2 for $6 at Arby's. We're going to go ahead and pay for you once a week for 3 weeks.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So, moving on from the South, we're heading over to the West now, right?
Yep.
AFC West. Okay. Denver, Kansas City, Las Vegas, and I keep wanting to say San Diego, but Los Angeles.
It's the San Diego Chargers.
Let's
San Diego Superchargers. It's San Diego. It will forever be San Diego. Fuck off.
Yep. Oh my God. So the AFC West, I think they're going to be the new AFC North. I think for many years, the AFC North was a powerhouse, and there's always at least 2 or 3 of the teams getting into the playoffs every year, and that was before they added 2 teams. I think that the AFC West is turning into that. I think Justin Herbert, man, who saw that coming? I don't think any of us saw the type of production that he ended up balling out with, but the Chiefs are still going to run this division for the foreseeable future. I think that Herbert brings the Chargers up to the next level, and I think that they're going to be the second team to beat in that division, but I think the Raiders are obviously going to give them a run for their money. Denver, I'm going to try not to be too biased here, try to look at this objectively. Denver, like I've said before, great young team with a lot of talent on paper. I truly think Denver is just one good quarterback away from being a top 10 team in the NFL, but that's with my own personal bias injected in there. But
yeah, and obviously I'll go ahead and cover the Raiders. I kind of went to a point of this. I think we shit the bed last offseason, only improving 1 win from 7-9 to 8-8. Both years we started out, we kind of had a solid record, 6-3 after 9 weeks of play, and then just out of nowhere we just kind of collapsed both times late in the season. I think here's the deal with the Raiders as far as what I'm going to break down the state of our franchise. From a Raiders fan, right now, Derek Carr is the quarterback. I want him as the quarterback in the future. I don't want to pay more for a better quarterback. Having Russ or Deshaun Watson would be nice, but Derek Carr, where he's at with his salary versus his production, I think it's a small value move. Josh Jacobs is a great running back. I think Darren Waller is the 1B best tight end in the NFL, and I think in the next couple of years as Travis Kelce gets older and Waller, who is 27 years old, but still obviously has some time underneath him and doesn't really have the miles on him that Kelce did, I think he will be the best tight end in the NFL for probably the next 5 to 10 years. But outside of that, our defense is horseshit. We absolutely have to fix that. But this team it frustrates me so much because they are talented enough to beat the Chiefs, and they are the only team to actually really beat the Chiefs outside of the Buccaneers. And the Buccaneers use the same philosophy of when we did beat the Chiefs, and we almost beat them a second time too. So I know we have the talent there on our best day to win a Super Bowl. But the most frustrating thing is on our worst day, we could have lost to the fucking Jets. Mm-hmm. And so that is literally the definition of a bipolar football team. And I think they need to get some consistency. I think Derek needs to step up and even be more of a leader in that locker room. I know the guys love him, but he needs to get more of that Black Mamba mentality that he kind of adopted this year, because we saw 2016 Derek Carr back this year. He needs to take that next jump, and I think he can, because I see it out of him all the time, and the problem is there's just times where he falls flat, but I'm seeing less and less of that as he progresses on. And so as a Raiders fan, I think next year we're a playoff team, providing we don't lose the offseason. I don't even think we have to be overwhelming winners, but what you got to do is you got to go out and you got to get yourself a number 1 wide receiver. Keep the offensive line together. I think you actually, for the cost-cutting moves, you get rid of Tyrell Williams, LaMarcus Joyner, and Trent Brown. That's going to free up almost $40 million in cap space, give us about $20 to $25 million in cap space to play with in free agency in the draft. There's a couple of other cost-cutting moves we can do to really give ourselves some good cap space going forward. And I think we have the pieces to be a decent team. And once again, I think on our best day, we can win the Super Bowl. So we could be like a Buccaneers and maybe put together a 3-4 game stretch to win. But that is me being extremely hopeful as a Raiders fan, because what I see out of this team 70% of the time is a mid-level football team that can maybe squeak into the playoffs, but then would get blown out by a team with real talent. To where I see the Broncos is, once again, like you said, if you guys get a Deshaun Watson, we're the basement of the division at 6-10, 7-9 team, playing that divisional schedule because the Chargers are good. But you guys could make that leap if you get Deshaun Watson. What do you think happens if you guys get him? What do you think you give up for him? And then what do you think happens afterwards?
If we get Deshaun Watson, I think that
what does that trade package look like? Give me the package.
2 first-round picks, a second-round pick, and Bradley Chubb. And Drew Lock.
Okay. I was about to say Lock has to go, I think, too.
Yep. I think
Lock
that's what a package looks like for Deshaun Watson. You're basically selling the farm for your future. But when you have a situation to get a generational talent at quarterback who can compete, I think the best 3 mobile quarterbacks in the NFL, so I'm not putting Rodgers into this equation because he's more of I'm talking the best new age mobile quarterbacks in the NFL right now.
Younger quarterbacks.
Yeah, the younger mobile quarterbacks we got right now are, as far as from a talent standpoint, Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, and Deshaun Watson. I think
Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are a step
tier
below.
2. They're tier 2.
Okay, just making sure.
Yep, I think that Murray, Mahomes, and Watson are tier 1. And so getting a quarterback like that when he's only, what is Watson, 24, 25 years old?
Oh,
I mean, he's young. He's young. So you're talking about a quarterback that still has, by today's standards, I mean, he could have 10,
by Tom Brady standards, he's got 20 years left.
45 years left. No, I think he could have easily 10 to 15 years left in the tank. And I think that even though you give up 2 first-round picks, you have a decade and a half to spend future first-round picks building a team around him, even though you've already got a good young team. So I think it's a perfect fit for Deshaun Watson. And again, I'm trying to be objective, not as a Broncos fan. I do think the situation is great for him there. And I think that if we keep a young, talented roster around him on the offense and we focus on building a defense up, I think that we could be a championship level team year in and year out. But enough on our teams.
One more thing I'm going to add there, just from the AFC West, and then we're actually going to transition to the NFC West. I'm going to make a quick comparison that'll make this transition here. Rams to Raiders. When you look at teams in the past couple of years whose trade philosophies have been the opposite with first-round picks, the Rams have spent first-round picks on premier talent, bringing people like Jalen Ramsey into the fold, and then you see the Raiders who traded away Khalil Mack to get first-round picks back and invest on future talent. And I think you've seen, in my personal aspect of trading the first round picks, if you can get a premier player like that, the Rams, haven't had a first round pick and won't have a first round pick, God, probably for the last 5 years and for the next 15 years, the way it seems to be going. But what do you think with the Rams getting Matt Stafford, and how does that set up the NFC West going forward?
I absolutely love it, man. Matt Stafford, talk about a superstar quarterback that is a victim of his own team. Matt Stafford, I think, is easily a top 10 quarterback in terms of talent. I think that if he was on, literally probably 20 of the other NFL teams, other than where he's at, he'd probably have a ring or 2 already in his career.
If he and Calvin Johnson are with almost any other organization, they win a ring together. Absolutely.
No doubt about it. And I think that Sean McVay, obviously one of the best head coaches in the league, the fact that he's the same age as me just weirds me out. God, I'm getting old, but he's young. Anyways, it's a hit miss. But I am so excited to see Stafford out from the shackles of Detroit. I feel bad for the people of Detroit because their teams are just they're horrible. But Stafford, I believe in the guy, and I think he's going to do great things with the Rams. And I'm just picturing Matt Stafford with Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp and Tyler Higbee and all these different weapons around. Now they got Cam Akers. Talk about an emerging stud, man.
Oh, love Cam Akers.
Cam Akers is going to be good. I'm excited to see where this offense ends up going this year, and I don't see them taking any steps back on defense. Obviously, the Rams have a great defense, so I think the Rams are. I could see Stafford taking them to the NFC Championship next year.
Well, and that's the crazy thing. So last year with the Rams, I kind of looked at them as this team that had kind of plateaued. They made the Super Bowl against the Patriots, and then they kind of fizzled out the next year, and we're sitting here and we look at what is the ceiling of what the Rams have. Sure, they have Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, Higbee, everybody you mentioned. On defense, you have Aaron Donald. They go out and get Jalen Ramsey. You're like, good pickup, but what is the ceiling that this team has? They surprised some people this year. They make it to the playoffs, beat the Seahawks, go to the divisional round, and I think that was a good thing for them. But this was the surprise move because I didn't believe that the Rams were going to be ballsy enough to make the move that they needed to make, and that was go out and get yourself the next tier quarterback. I like a Jared Goff as a person. He'll be a starter in this league for 10 years, whether I like it or not, or whether anybody likes it or not. But he's just not that quarterback that leads you to a Super Bowl while making the money that he is. If he didn't lead you to a Super Bowl on the rookie contract, he's not going to do it while making $20 million a year. So getting Stafford, I think, puts them up with the Seahawks.
Hey, Cole.
Yeah.
So he did lead them to a Super Bowl.
I know. Okay, lead them to a Super Bowl victory.
Oh, victory.
Okay.
You said
but you
Jared
remember
Goff's not the quarterback that's going to lead you to a Super Bowl.
not the one that's going to lead them to a Super Bowl victory. But also I don't think he doesn't do it off of the rookie contract because he did it on there, and you got to remember that defense was crazy. Dante Fowler was a backup.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, I think the NFC West. What do you think the Niners do? Let's talk quarterback carousel. We'll kind of shoot through this year. Quarterback carousel, Jimmy Garoppolo. What do you think he does this offseason? Because honestly, surprise move. I see him getting traded for by the Patriots, and the Niners go out and they shock the world and they pick up somebody. Whether it be Carson Wentz, Deshaun Watson, or they trade up in the draft and get one of the premier three, in I view of Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, or Trevor Lawrence. But I think they go up and they make a surprise move this offseason.
I think that they go after their guy in the draft. I don't think that Shanahan wants Wentz. I think Shanahan wants Aaron Rodgers, but Green Bay's not going to let him go. I know there was like that 2 or 3 days where there was all that speculation about the Niners possibly trading for Rodgers and him coming home to the Bay Area and all this stuff. I don't think that's going to happen. The Niners, if I'm going to be honest, I do not think they trade Jimmy Garoppolo. I think they trade up and they draft a quarterback this year. I don't know who. I'm not going to speculate on who, but I still think Jimmy Garoppolo is the starting quarterback at the beginning of the season next year.
And I can definitely see that. I just love my hot take being like Jimmy Garoppolo is just going to leave town. Yeah. That's what I would love for it to happen. Obviously, just rounding out the rest of the division, Cardinals going to look about the same next year with Kyler Murray. Larry Fitzgerald, hope he's back, but if he retires, I think they go receiver in the draft to round out that three-headed monster, add another person to Christian Kirk and DeAndre Hopkins. And then the Seahawks, obviously tons of questions there with Russ. Looked good early, kind of fizzled out late. We'll see what happens there. But then shifting over to the NFC South, obviously we have our Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But let's go ahead and touch back on the dumpster fire that is going to be the New Orleans Saints. Where the hell do you go from here with Drew Brees retiring and just between 60 and 100 million in negative cap space?
I think you go with what you already have right now. And one of the biggest surprises the Saints hit me with this year is that they did not start Jameis Winston. Now, when they picked up Jameis, I thought to myself, what a perfect landing spot for Jameis. Okay. You just got done, now granted, it was not the best season with the interceptions, but you just threw for 5,000 yards.
And 30 touchdowns.
Very rare. Yeah, very rare does that happen from a quarterback. So you're talking about a guy, and I have not given up on Jameis Winston. I believe in his talent, but you're talking about a guy. Oh, geez, I sound like Chris Collinsworth. I need to stop saying that.
See, here's a guy.
Here's a guy. No, Jameis Winston has the talent, but he doesn't have the discipline. I think you just need the right coach, the right quarterback coach, to help fine tune him. Really. If you got somebody who can throw for 5,000 yards and somebody who can throw for 30 touchdowns, and you can just notch down those interceptions, which in turn should lead to more touchdowns because you're continuing a drive, right? If you can turn him into a 4,500 yard, 35, 40 touchdown guy, Josh Allen. I think that you can have I think you got your next generation there. I think Jameis, he's been in the league for 5-6 years now. He's probably got another 10 years left in him. I think that the Saints should really look at moving forward with Jameis and get him the proper coaching he needs to help him go through his reads and progressions better, so he's not throwing as many touchdowns. But the Saints, I think they're going to be going through a rough patch. I think Breeze retires, and I think that the next 2 to 3 years is going to be a rebuilding cycle for them.
Well, and I think Jameis got a lot of shit for the 30 interception season, which, don't get me wrong, that is an outrageous amount of interceptions. That is something you see out of like the 1970s, out of like a rookie quarterback. I mean, Terry Bradshaw threw like 26 interceptions in his rookie year. Peyton Manning threw like 28 in his rookie year. So kind of crazy to see the early interceptions. But one thing no one talks about is the interceptions the first year in the Bruce Arians offense. Because we saw that with Tom Brady this year. He actually had his most interceptions in a season with 15. Jameis had 30. And then I actually just pulled the stats. Carson Palmer in his first Bruce Arians season had 22 interceptions. So how many times do you think that's obviously Jameis having an issue? Obviously he had the LASIK eye surgery, so maybe that's a thing. But I mean, how many times do you just think he's counted out? And then also to the same aspect, the guy who was drafted after him, Marcus Mariota. Let's go with a little bit of a rival here. Who do you think starts and plays better next year? Because Mariota is generating some trade buzz as well himself.
I think Jameis starts and plays better. I'm still going to put Jameis ahead of Mariota there, but let me ask you this. 2019, Jameis throws 30 interceptions. How many interceptions do you think he threw in 2018?
God, he was probably around, 13 or 15?
Yeah, 14.
Yeah, 14.
So, I mean, I believe Bruce Arians was not the head coach at that point in time.
Oh, God, who was the head coach in Tampa Bay?
I can't even remember right now, and that was only a couple years ago.
I think it was like Greg Schiano or something like that. Some nameless guy.
Yeah, but anyway, so that's an interesting correlation. I don't know if that necessarily has anything to do with it, but I think the fact that he only threw 14 interceptions in 2018, which is his most recent non-shitty interception year, he has the talent. He just needs the coaching to fine-tune him. And then Mariota, I don't know. I still think he remains with the Raiders next year.
So I would like to see him traded away just because it's all free money, and that's $10 million off of our cap books. I also think Jameis probably starts for the Saints or maybe goes somewhere else. I think, probably 85-90% chance he stays with the Saints there. Only other team I think with as controversial of a quarterback decision with these guys is because the NFC South, it's weird because Brady at 43 is probably the most stable quarterback because you have the Falcons with Matt Ryan and then the Panthers with Teddy Bridgewater. Out of those two quarterbacks, who moves? And do you have a destination? Like which one of those guys moves or isn't starting next year? Because I think Matt Ryan could be moved on from Atlanta and Carolina could not be sold on Teddy.
I was looking over the PFF mock draft and I actually agree with them. They have the Falcons trading down and giving the Panthers their pick and the Panthers taking Justin Fields as their future quarterback. And I like that. I like that move. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think the Panthers, especially with Matt Rule, he's probably looking for, a more collegiate system quarterback.
Definitely a dynamic guy. Like
yeah,
Fields.
Exactly. He's looking for somebody like that. I love Teddy, man. I really do. It's just too bad what happened to him. I think he had a lot of potential, but I think Teddy is going to be relegated to a career backup. I think he's about to go into that Josh McCown phase of his career, unfortunately. And I think that I could totally see Justin Fields going to Carolina and being their quarterback of the future.
Oh, I think one of those teams, especially with Carolina being at 8 and the Falcons being at number 4, I think one of them picks a quarterback, and the Falcons are going to kind of be the pivot point and the control point, having that number 4 pick. Because like you said, I mean, PFF is mocking that, and there's several other. I think Todd McShay actually this morning mocked the Panthers trading up as well. He actually had them trading up with the Jets, I believe.
Okay.
But still, the Panthers very heavy candidate to trade up just because you have Matt Rule there and Joe Brady. So you have a lot of offensive creativity and someone like a Justin Fields who's got the speed, who can definitely, break tackles, who's that modern quarterback you kind of idealize. I think would be fantastic for the Panthers, but I could also see the Falcons trading away Matt Ryan and moving on to someone like Zach Wilson, who's a little bit more pocket heavy. So the NFC South is interesting for the quarterback carousel.
I could definitely see that. Only reason I'm not falling into that is from what I've seen from the beat writers in Atlanta, Matt Ryan is not going anywhere. Either is Julio Jones. So they're going to keep them intact.
Good, because I would like to see at least ATL run it back, because we saw this year they could have been picking in the back half of this draft if they could just finish.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just kind of like a girl who's always unsatisfied. They just never finish. So moving on over to the NFC North, obviously we have the Packers winning the division last year. The Vikings we talked about with some potential. You got Motor City Dan Campbell biting off fucking kneecaps in Detroit.
Right.
But the most interesting team going into this offseason is you got Mitch Trubisky going to free agency. You got Nick Foles with a hell of a contract. What do the Chicago Bears do in your mind?
They will have Carson Wentz at the beginning of the season. They'll have Carson Wentz in the next 2 weeks.
Bet it.
Bet it.
Bet it, because I think he's going to the Colts. So let's go ahead and shake on this right now.
Lunch right now. We'll buy
lunch right now.
Lunch and that. So the bet is that Carson Wentz is going to go to the Chicago Bears, right?
Yeah, but I'm betting that Carson Wentz goes to the Colts. So if he goes to
neither,
canceled.
Bet's off. Bet is null and void.
Yeah, we buy Paul lunch.
Paul claims the lunch.
Yeah, Paul,
okay.
The non-football fan claims the lunch.
I do. I think Foles goes back for his third. Would it be his third stint in Philly?
Third stint in Philly.
I think that's an NFL record right there. Put him in Canton. And I think Carson Wentz goes to the Bears. I think Carson Wentz is definitely an upgrade from Foles or from Trubisky, but as long as Matt Nagy is the head coach there, I do not see them rising above the ranks of mediocrity. I think that they will. I think that their ceiling is going to be 9 or 10 wins a year. Ceiling.
But that's so crazy, just because I look at the Bears and I still see the defense. Obviously, they made it at 8-8 this year. They knocked out the Cardinals, who would have been a much more interesting playoff team. I mean, do you agree? Because you were kind of a Cardinals fan, like throughout the year.
Absolutely. The Cardinals have they implode, man. I'm on the edge about Kingsbury right now too, but just from what I've observed from Matt Nagy and his play calling, I think that the Bears have a good young roster, and I think that they can be good, but I don't think Nagy is the right coach for them. I think they need just a little bit better coach, and they can be a strong competing team every year. They went to the divisional round 2 years ago too.
Yeah, and I mean, they've shown that they have talent even with Trubisky being on that rookie contract. They obviously paid the defensive players. I would be a huge fan of watching Chicago trade up in the draft and maybe getting one of those. Chicago's going to fall in that Mac Jones range. Mac Jones and Kyle Trask are going to be two guys I have favored to go up in the later first round, and I think he would be fantastic going to the Bears. Carson Wentz also too, but I think Carson Wentz, the reason I like Indianapolis is just because of the Frank Reich connection. Once again, Reich is a way better coach than Nagy. So when you talk about, kind of recovering and polishing some of the mistakes that Wentz has developed in his game, I like to see him there. But with the Bears, you got to do something because Allen Robinson might leave town. And I think that's probably actually the bigger thing is not only who they get a quarterback. Yep. Because if they trade for somebody before free agency, do you see Robinson coming back? Because I do.
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. I think actually the key piece of this offense next year isn't even going to be Robinson. I think it's going to be David Montgomery. Montgomery had a quiet rookie season, but even coming out of college, he is a powerhouse running back. I have been excited to see him play at an NFL level for quite some time. And even though it was disappointing last year, the last half of this season, we got a lot of flashes of what Montgomery is capable of. And I think that if they're going to be successful, they need to build this offense around a run-first offense with Montgomery and scheme their offense around him. And that will, in turn, obviously open up the play action. And I think that they will be a much more dynamic offense. Because right now, like you said, the Bears have a great defense, but they are just they're like the Broncos. They're just a wet paper towel mediocre offense, and they need to remedy that. And I think that if they can focus on the talent of Montgomery and upgrade their quarterback, I think that those are the two missing pieces of the puzzle.
100%. And, kind of before we go to the NFC East, do you see the Vikings or the Bears kind of making that jump to challenge the Packers? Who do you think going into next year, predicting it, who do you think makes that jump between those two teams? Because the Lions obviously have a way to go. They gave Dan Campbell like a 4 or 5 year contract for a reason. Who between those other two teams go?
This, I'll actually touch base on that in a second. Dan Campbell, dude, like I have been getting so much flack online because Nobody
too, by the
seems
way.
to believe in Dan Campbell, but I love the guy. When he took over as interim coach of the Dolphins, he rejuvenated that team. It is one thing to be a coach, but it's another thing to be a leader. And I think that Dan Campbell has that leadership quality that the Lions have been missing. And I think he brings excitement to that locker room. And I think that he can really turn things around in Detroit. I'm excited to see what he does. Detroit's not going to be good for the next probably 2 or 3 years. They're definitely going through a full rebuild right now. But between the Bears and the Vikings, I am still going to go with the Vikings. They got the better team on paper, and they got the better head coach. And just off of those variables alone, I'm going to say the Vikings are still the next up to contend with the Packers, but I don't see anybody overthrowing the Packers for the next 3 to 5 years in that division.
Well, yeah, especially with Aaron Rodgers there. And then before that, Dan Campbell actually replaced Joe Philbin there, and then obviously probably should have gotten the job, and then Adam Gase gets hired, so we already shit on him for that one.
Yep.
So going into the final division here, and I kind of agree with you on that aspect too. The Packers just own the NFC North, but the NFC East, let's go ahead and talk about the dumpster fire that was this year.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I'm going to recap this one real fast. So the Washington football team won the division at 7-9. Which I thought early in the year we would have a 5-11 playoff team.
Yeah.
We would honestly have a 5-win playoff team. Obviously, Washington pulls it together. Love Alex Smith, Ron Rivera coming back from cancer. You can't help but love the team except for the team name, but that's why they're just Washington.
Yep.
Once you guys call yourself the Red Tails, you guys might actually be one of my favorite teams.
Right.
But I see that being the future of the division going forward. But let's not talk about the good. Let's talk about the bad. We're going to start from the bottom here. Dallas was supposed to win the division, loses Dak Prescott, absolutely falters. Zeke becomes a fumble problem. CeeDee Lamb looks good. Amari is Amari, but the defense looks like shit. So when you're coming back next year, coming from last year where they are almost perennial Super Bowl favorites, to this offseason, there's a lot of questions.
Dude.
Do you think there's any sort of possibility that Dak doesn't come back?
No. I think Dak is back no matter what. I don't think – we're – talk about a team who, on paper, should be the best team in football right now.
Hands down.
It's the Dallas Cowboys. They have so much talent. It's unbelievable. But the minute they hired Mike McCarthy, I just went, what the hell is Jerry thinking? As long as Mike McCarthy is their head coach, I think they will be an 8-8 football team. If they should have went after like a Lincoln Riley. They should have went after some stud quarterback coach, somebody who can really rejuvenate this team and build a more dynamic playbook for this offense, because there is no reason why the Dallas Cowboys should not be a 12-4 football team every year.
If not better. Let's talk about the defense too.
So talented. They need to build up their defense. Yes. They need to right now their focus should be on defense. It really should be. The amount of points they allowed is disgusting. But there were so many of these games, even when Dak was healthy, that they should have been winning. And I think, and I blame McCarthy for that. I had my reservations on McCarthy, especially just because of his track record, his final 5 years with Green Bay. But I also had a little bit of hope from him because he claimed that he took this year off. He reviewed film. He had all of his coach buddies over, and they tried to explore what we need to change and what we need to evolve. He said, I need to evolve my way of thinking. I need to evolve my way of coaching to fit where the league is today, because it's not what it was when I first started. And I'm not seeing any evidence that he learned anything over this past year.
Right.
So,
it's the same thing, because Matt LaFleur goes into Green Bay, absolutely revolutionizes, makes Aaron Rodgers love football again, because Aaron Rodgers has looked like a complete past person, especially when watching McAfee Tuesdays. This year with Aaron Rodgers, he's a complete separate quarterback now that he's a little bit more creative, and in an environment where he feels like he is happy to go to work. And we can all kind of relate to that in the day-to-day grind for the job. With the Cowboys, this year, they're the Cowboys. I think they're a minimum 8-8. That might be where they end up with you. Dak comes back. They have all the pieces. Dear God, I'd like to see him actually put it together, because I've shit on the Cowboys and I love to hate them. But low key, I'm just sitting here like, God, can you actually put it together? Because I loved the Romo, Barber, Terrell Owens team back in 2007, and they kind of crapped the bed there. And then you follow up with just years and years and years and years of mediocrity, like not bad enough to get good picks, but not good enough at the same time. So hopefully they use picking in the top 10 this year to their advantage. Between them, the Eagles, and the Giants, the divisional losers, who do you think is most likely to come back and pick in the top 10 next year?
to pick in the top.
Like they are all picking in the top 10, obviously, this year because of their record. Who is most likely not to improve on that, get worse, or stay in the same area and pick in the top 10 again next year?
The Philadelphia Eagles.
Why do you think that? I mean, new head coach aside, because Frank Wright's zombie understudy. Don't like Nick Sorrentino or whatever his name is.
I wasn't a fan of the head coaching hire. I think Jalen Hurts has potential, but I think he's still a little bit too raw. I don't know, the Giant. I think it's gonna be between the Giants and the Eagles, if I'm being honest with you. I think the Giants are a little bit better equipped.
And they didn't have Saquon.
Exactly, and that's the next big thing I was going to touch on. I think the Giants with Saquon Barkley are a completely different team. Daniel Jones was better his rookie year by far than he was last year, and I'm wondering, is this a Baker situation where you come out of the gate your rookie year and you're showing a lot of flashes, you're doing pretty good, and then you regress really bad your sophomore year, and then you turn it around with a new head coach your third year? Does that happen with Daniel Jones? But they still got Sterling Shepard, and they got Evan Ingram, and they've got Saquon Barkley. They got a lot of good players on paper. I do like Miles Sanders on the Eagles. I think he is probably their best offensive weapon right now. But I still think that the Eagles are behind the Giants in their rebuild process, and I don't think either team will be picking outside the top 15. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, top 15 or top 10.
Yeah, I think that I can see both the Giants and the Eagles picking top 10 next year. But I think the Cowboys, as long as Dak stays healthy, the Cowboys are a 10-win team, and I think that the Cowboys will be a lot more competitive next year. I actually think the Cowboys are going to win the division next year.
And I think that's a popular pick with Dak coming back. But I would still love to see Washington build on what they did this year. Obviously, fantastic coaching. They have everything there. They just need, the rocket boosters of a great quarterback to push him over, or maybe Antonio Gibson makes that, second year jump as a running back.
Yep.
Obviously, having him as a second round pick, you still have him 3 years under contract, McLaurin for 2 years. Chase Young for 4 years as a first-round pick because you can fifth-year option him. So you have a lot of roster control. Alex Smith's contract is actually off your books because love Alex Smith, but that's one thing people don't realize is his $23.5 million was on the books this last year, and now it's not going to be. So, sure, they could bring him back, as a backup, at a little bit of a minimum salary.
Yep. With
being injured, he made his money. So good for him. But, at the same time, you are clearing quarterback-level money, and I think we are going to see this offseason how valuable cap space is going to be. I think it's more valuable this offseason than ever. So
that's actually where I see Mac Jones going.
Yeah. So let's kind of go ahead and touch on that a little bit. I just want to go over the quarterback class here with you before we end up signing off here tonight. We're going to start at the top of the class. Trevor Lawrence. Is there any possibility in the world he doesn't go to the Jaguars?
No.
Okay. Then what do you think of him going to the Jaguars with Urban Meyer with, because you got Robinson there, you got Keelan Cole, you got Laviska Shenault. You have a little bit of playmaking potential in that offense. So does Jacksonville jump to a 7 or 8 win team this year?
Yes.
Maybe.
I think Jacksonville goes 6-11. I keep forgetting we're adding an extra game next year, so I have to redo the math in my head.
Right, 17 games next year, boys.
Yep. So there's 18 weeks now next year. Yep. So there's going to be 17 games after the bye week. So I think that they go 6-11 next year. I think that what we're going to see out of the Jaguars is similar to what we saw out of the Bengals this year, but a little bit better.
Gotcha. And then so let's go to the second quarterback because I feel like after Trevor Lawrence, obviously there's a little bit of a drop down. And so with the next quarterbacks, you're going to have Justin Fields out of Ohio State and then also Zach Wilson out of BYU. To go ahead and preface this a little bit, obviously Justin Fields, stud prospect coming out of Georgia, goes and enrolls at Georgia his freshman year, doesn't get the starting job over Jake Fromm, so he transfers after he quits out after 4 games, transfers to Ohio State, has an incredible career there. Fantastic physical prospect. You're almost looking at not quite Lamar Jackson speed, but definitely has that dual threat capability. Yep. And then you switch over to Zach Wilson, someone who was good last year in BYU, but just blew off the charts this year. Fantastic arm talent, definitely a little bit more of a prototypical quarterback. Who do you see going first out of the two? Because you have the Jets at 2, the Dolphins at 3, the Falcons at 4, Bengals and Eagles probably aren't quarterback players. So really in that Jets trading out spot, Miami and the Falcons, who do you think goes first, Wilson or Fields?
That's tough, man.
Because it really probably depends on the team, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it depends on the team and what you have around them. Not trying to just use PFF as a scapegoat. I just actually really like their mock draft they did. I think the Jets are more suited for a typical your typical pocket passing system quarterback. And they do have Zach Wilson going there, and so I could definitely see that. I think if the Jets decide not to keep Sam Darnold, they decide to draft instead of moving forward with Sam Darnold, I think Wilson does go first. Otherwise, outside of that scenario, obviously, I think if the Jets pass on Wilson, I think Fields will go first.
Yeah, because I feel like the only situation to where Wilson gets drafted over Fields, because I think Wilson's the better prospect coming out, probably the better year one starter. Mm-hmm. Fields just offers that dynamic upside. So looking at the teams who could possibly even trade in, if you're not the Jets or even the Falcons, because if the Falcons move on from Ryan, I can see Zach Wilson stepping in as a young Matt Ryan, because a lot of people give him a pro comp of that. But yeah, if you're looking at the Panthers, Denver, trades up. I think they could like a dynamic quarterback. Any of these teams who could really trade up, I think Fields is the prospect there. For them, and so Zach Wilson probably falls by the wayside after that. And then you got a couple of quarterbacks who could go anywhere from the late first, or they could drop with the offseason, because you never know what the draft shows. And Kyle Trask and Mac Wilson. And we'll touch on Trey Lance here in a second, but out of those two, just from what you've heard, obviously Mac Wilson leading the best offense of all time at Alabama. Kyle Trask really showing out.
Mac Wilson?
Yep, Mac. Yeah. Or Mac Jones. Yeah, Wilson. Yeah, sorry. I don't know. All these quarterbacks from Alabama have such like white boy names like Greg McElroy and John David Booty and Mac Wilson, Mac Jones, not Mac Daddy. But out of those guys, you see a system quarterback from Alabama, and then you got Trask, who is your traditional pocket passer. Just kind of knowing what you would go. Who would you go with? The guy with the pedigree or the guy with the more classic appeal?
I think you go with Mac Jones.
Even though he was throwing to the greatest receiving core of all time,
yeah,
he could be thin.
No, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't he? He can be thin. Are you talking about Tom Brady? Is that a Tom Brady jab? What all the scouts are saying about Brady? He's too thin. That's why nobody can. Mac Jones. Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't he? Yeah, he had a superstar cast, but he still threw for 4,400 yards.
Oh yeah, pretty much was a Heisman candidate. I love Mac Jones. I just love playing a little devil's advocate there because.
Absolutely. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not, I'm going to claim ignorance here because I don't know enough about Kyle Trask. I'm not really a college football person, so I don't even start really diving into film or looking into guys until, like I said, mid to late February. So I'm a little too ignorant on Trask and Jones. I've really only done a lot of research on the first three guys, So I'm going to claim a little ignorance here and kind of take a step back from that one. But if I had to wing it, I'd say Mac Jones.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, definitely check out Kyle Trask. And then the next guy I'm going to touch on is Trey Lance, North Dakota State. Pretty much Justin Fields on steroids for both good and bad. You have the extreme arm strength. The guy could probably huck it 80 yards on his feet or one knee, Jamarcus Russell status. And then on top of that, he's probably going to run like a 4.45 in the 40. Fantastic athleticism, very unpolished in a run-heavy Division I AA school in North Dakota State. If you are the Broncos, because if you guys don't make a popular move, I love Trey Lance to you guys, letting maybe Drew Lock one more year to prove himself. Do you take Trey Lance, and what is the intrigue there?
I think I think it'd be intriguing to take Trey Lance. I think that he is going to be a boomer bust. I think there's not.
He's Josh Allen, really.
Yeah. So I don't think he's a immediate starting quarterback. But I think it would maybe light a fire under Drew Lock. It would be interesting to see, have Trey Lance come in as the second string behind Drew Lock to start out the season, and maybe that ignites a fire under Lock, and we see, a whole new quarterback out of him. Or if not, he gets supplanted by Lance, and we'll see what Lance has to offer. I don't know. We'll see.
Of course, and that's what we'll kind of wrap up with you. I'm going to go over some sleepers here, but Jace, we'll get you off the show here. Just because I know it's getting late, we got to wrap it up for you. Go ahead and give me 3 predictions, hot takes that maybe no one else will predict for the NFL season coming up in 2021 before we have everything going on. 3 things most people will be surprised by that you think are going to happen next year.
Okay. So I did not prepare for this, so I'm just going to...
I love my random questions, as you're going to learn. As my co-host.
I am going I think the Dolphins win 12 games next year. I think that we see a whole new quarterback out of Tua, and I don't think anybody's going to see that coming. That's going to be my hot take number one. I think the Dolphins I think the Dolphins do this year what the Bills did last year. I think they take a big step forward, and I'm excited to see what they do there. I want to go with the Browns, but I don't think that would surprise too many people. So I'm trying to think of some big hot takes.
Hot take here. The Bengals make the playoffs next year. What do you think?
Yeah, I can see that. Well, that's not, and I don't mean offense. I don't think that's too much of a hot take right now because of the expanded playoff.
True.
So
with
there's
the
extra wild cards now. So I think it makes it a little bit easier to solidify a wild card spot. But man, I need more thinking than this, Cole. I need more time.
All right. Last hot take question here.
Okay.
Looking at the list of the NFL teams, I'm going to go ahead and preface this. The number one overall pick next year. Sometimes you can go ahead and you can look ahead because I think we both, and everybody mostly, looked at the Jets this year as a team who's going to pick top 5 next year. You see some other certain teams, I'm not going to name drop because I think I know who you might pick, but if you have a team next year, who do you think is going to be the worst team in the NFL in 2022's NFL draft?
The Houston Texans.
Hands down, that's exactly who I'd pick.
Yep.
I don't really know who else I would pick other than if I could just see maybe the Saints imploding historically. I think their coaching's way too good to lose that many games. Yeah. I could see the Jaguars in their first year just because I think they gutted the roster to an extreme point. Mm-hmm. Like, you could have lost those games with one or two more important players on the team and still gotten Trevor Lawrence or a top-tier quarterback who's going to help you. So the fact that you got rid of, franchise guys like Calais Campbell, Yannick Ngakoue, kudos for keeping Miles Jack, I guess, but you really kind of got rid of the whole franchise there. So yep. I think it's either going to come down to the Jaguars or the Texans. So the NFC South is either going to be boom or bust with the Colts, Titans on the top, and the rest of the teams at the bottom.
Breaking news here: the Eagles are not happy with the Bears' offer, and they're not biting on it. So that's what's holding up the Carson Wentz trades.
So Carson Wentz is going to Indianapolis, like I predicted.
Multiple reports are suggesting either the Colts or the Bears. So we'll see what happens. But
one last quarterback carousel off-season take before you leave. Cam Newton, where does he go? Because obviously this year, you think about this, let's go ahead and recap last year. Yep. With Cam Newton last year, huge off-season Instagram workout posts. Everybody thought he was just going to absolutely blow up, and then looked good a little bit for the Patriots, I guess, early. But then, you kind of saw the cracks in the pavement there. It looked like old injury-riddled Cam Newton. They actually started Jarrett Stidham for a couple of games. So I don't think he actually goes anywhere and starts. But where could be an interesting place he goes to back up next year? Because personally, my pick, shocking enough, even though they got John Wolford there, is going to be the Rams. Because you got Matt Stafford coming in, who's a tough guy, but at the same time, is injury riddled. I think Sean McVay loves his gadget players. He could be like the next kind of Sean Payton. Who knows? Maybe Cam Newton, because Cam Newton can still run the ball.
The Baltimore Ravens.
So because RG3 is gone from them, they're gone, and so. That would be great, wouldn't it? Have Cam teach Lamar the little bit more like the power run style. You get pretty much the best two running quarterbacks of the past 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he'd be the perfect complement for that offense to be a backup quarterback. So
awesome. Well, Jace, I just want to say appreciate it, man, for you coming on here. We're going to go ahead and wrap up this 2020 NFL season recap. We're going to be doing more coverage in the NFL season coming up. Obviously, Jason and I will dive a little bit more into the NFL draft as far as who some of our favorite players are, who some of the sleepers are we have viewing up. And then as well, he's going to be joining me in a lot of the co-hosting as far as just having guests onto the show and providing another aspect and making sure I don't get too out of control. So I just want to...
man.
Right. I just want to say I appreciate you, bud. Thanks for coming on the show, and it's definitely something we've been waiting on. But once again, for Beers and Bullshit, we are out.
Have a good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Hello, Wisconsin.